And good morning, good evening, good afternoon to wherever and whenever you are in the world. This is Adam Harrison, and this is the handcrafted guitar builder. It used to be known as the Cigar Box Guitar Builder podcast. As mentioned previously, we kind of felt the need for the name change, just simply due to the fact that so many people who are on, who listen to the podcast and who are on the Facebook group, which used to be of the same name, many of these people they don't just build cigar box guitars, and I just felt that it was a very limiting title for the show. And having said that, I still absolutely adore building cigar box guitars, but I don't just build cigar box guitars, and I suppose this is another avenue for my creative outlet, or this is my opportunity, to give something back. I'm nowhere near of the caliber of builder as many of you out there, but I do know my way around the workbench, and I do try and make sure that my frets are nice and neat, as you've probably heard on the other podcasts, and I do make sure that my fretboards look sparkly and shiny, and I do try and make sure that I don't end up with fret overhang, and do try and make sure, of course, that I've got my guitar necks nicely oiled and all that sort of fun stuff. And I try and make sure that I'm using either very nice handmade accessories, etc., or quality bits and pieces that I buy from other places. So it's just me just trying to give back a little bit. And of course now, especially now over the last few months, I've really been concentrating on building electric guitars as well, not just 6-string guitars, but also 3- and 4-string solid body blues inspired instruments that are easy to play with one finger, I've just finished the knopw guitar, which is under the banner of Retro Electric Guitars. I'm still wondering whether it's been the right thing to do to actually have, effectively two businesses which are running from the same workshop. All it seemed to have done is actually doubled the workload as far as the technology side of things and the social media side of things is concerned. I'm still kind of deciding whether or not it has been the right move for my business. I suppose a lot of people would have simply said, why didn't you do what Daddy Mojo did and run all the different types of guitars that I build under the one banner of Birdwood Guitars. I don't know. I suppose I just had an epiphany. To be honest with you, I'll tell you what actually happened. I had a bit of an epiphany, and for some reason, the name. I was just sitting around one night, a month or so ago, a couple of months ago, and I just had this name for a business come into my head, Retro Electric Guitars, because I've been tossing up the idea of different names for the electric guitars that I was building, the 3- and the 4-string guitars, and I have been collecting the 1960s Japanese-made guitars, the Sakai's that I've been collecting, and the Tesco guitars, and the Kawai guitars, and I've been learning all about them, and I've been getting books, and I've been online, and because I really do love them. They're absolutely crazy loads of fun to build. And I suppose, coming back to the idea of the name change, it all kind of stemmed a little bit from this idea of opening up Retro Electric Guitars, which was going to focus solely on the 6-string instruments and the electric guitars and or acoustics if I could find them, and just basically the idea to find unloved instruments, and do them up and sell them for like a really friendly price on the website and on the Facebook page, and just do stuff up, just do crazy things to them, and sell the guitars at the markets, alongside the cigar box guitars that I build, and I just felt I wanted to talk about them on this kind of forum, on this kind of media, the podcast format, and I just felt that if I continued to keep the name Cigar Box Guitar Builder Podcast, it would kind of clash. The ideas would clash, and people would be listening, saying, "Well, what? Why are you talking about electric guitars, 6-string guitars, when this is a podcast about cigar box guitars?" And rightly so. So the idea now with, of course, the handcrafted guitar builder, it's simply any kind of handcrafted guitar. I can talk about cigar box guitars, and I can talk about electric guitars, I can talk about basses, I can talk about mandolins. Not that I know shit about mandolins, I don't. I can talk about banjos. I don't know anything about banjos, but I can talk about them, I suppose. But you probably wouldn't be very interested in what I'm going to say, and it's probably leading on to what I'm going to talk about today. The idea of interviewing people is still there. I'm still collecting ideas for people who I want to interview. But I suppose today I wanted to have a chat to you about the work I'm doing at the moment with old, unloved instruments, and see if I can get people out there to maybe think again about that old guitar that was going to get thrown out, or that old guitar that was that's sitting by the side of the road that nobody seems to want anymore. Is there still life in the beast? The other thought that I had as well is, during the week there is a gentleman named Ruakangas who has, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Ruakangas Guitars. He's based in Finland, and I've just been a huge fan of his instruments ever since I discovered him on YouTube. And he has an instrument, it's a LP style guitar that he started. He did a video. Set of videos. I think there's probably about maybe 10 videos in the series of I think the Unicorn. So if you look up Ruakangas, I can't spell it off the top of my head, and you'll hear me. I'm in the car at the moment because this is my clear space of thinking, and where I can talk about what I want to talk about and express. And he was talking about the cost of handmade electric guitars, and he was talking about instruments that he builds starting at around about the €3,000 mark, and he was saying that it's not a lot of money. Well, I live in Australia, and the exchange rate between Australia and Europe is not great. It's not as bad as some countries as an exchange rate, but if I were to purchase a guitar from Ruakangas, it would probably cost me in excess of $4,500, which Mr. Ruakangas, and I say this with a great deal of respect, may say that that's not a lot of money, but I very respectfully disagree. It is a lot of money. However, I will also say that it is a lot of money for a meticulously, beautifully handmade instrument. So let's get that really, really straight. It is a meticulously handcrafted instrument. the Ruakangas guitars, and I wholeheartedly suggest that you get online and look at his Instagram accounts and his Facebook accounts and his page and the YouTube videos that he does, and have a look at his instruments. And I am most certainly not having a go at Mr. Ruakangas, who is just, in my opinion, a master of his game. But I very respectfully say that if I am going to be purchasing, if I've got 3 kids, and my daughter is turning 14, my oldest daughter is turning 14, and to my utmost horror, she is showing a great deal of interest in purchasing, or getting me to purchase a set of drums for her. I live in a very small house, and so the idea of drums is quite horrifying. But the idea of purchasing a guitar for her is certainly up there. Having said that, I could also build her a guitar. That's not an issue at all. But if I wanted to go and purchase a guitar for her, I certainly wouldn't be spending 3,000 euros on a first guitar. Now, the argument that Mr. Ruakangas had was that to purchase a mass-produced instrument, it's a fair trade issue. He's basically talking about fair trade. He's talking about a fair day's work for a fair dollar, or a fair euro in his case. And what he was saying was that, from what I took from it, was that when you're purchasing guitars that are made in third world countries, he's worried about things like slave labour and people not earning, the basically work. The old saying of, and I say this with respect, the old saying of working for a bowl of rice. It's not. Let's be honest. It's many companies, big companies, multinational companies do get obviously work done in the third world, because it is a hell of a lot cheaper to pay someone far less than if they were getting it done, let's say, here in Australia or in the United States or in Europe, in certain places, in Europe, any of the first world countries, our wage rates are much higher. So I understand his argument there. I do completely understand his argument. The other flip side of the coin for that particular argument might be that, well, at least, these are people who are employed. They may not be getting employed for much money, but the flip side of the argument, some people will say, is that, well, at least they have a job. It's the lesser of two evils, maybe, that kind of an argument. Now, I'm not going to get on a political bandwagon here. I would hope that everybody is earning, a substantial wage, and in a perfect world, it would happen. Unfortunately, we live in a far from perfect world. So I completely understand his argument regarding that. But I have a way around it, and there is another way around it. And there are many builders out there who have a great passion for fixing old instruments, basically, repairing old instruments. A couple of people that spring to mind would be Guitars and Caffeine, the young lady from the United States who has the Guitars and Caffeine website and Instagram feed. Her name is escaping me for the moment, and I don't know, and I apologise for that. I'm a very big fan of her work, actually. I think she does a remarkable job. But she has a great passion for getting instruments into people's hands and doing up old instruments and teaching people how to, to fix old instruments. And, so I really suggest you go and check out Guitars and Caffeine and have a look at what she is doing. Her name, it's just maddening. Anyway, here in Australia there are quite a few people who have a real passion for old instruments. One in particular would be a fantastic builder from out of Melbourne, Harvester Guitars. please go and check out Harvester Guitars. He also builds a beautiful range of his own instruments. I would love to interview him, Andrew from Harvester Guitars. If you hear this podcast at some stage, give me a buzz. I would love to interview you for the podcast. But I'm an enormous fan of his work. He does aluminium necks and just the work that go, and the photos of the old guitars that go through his shop and the work that he does are absolutely wonderful. So go and check him out as well. Look, there's a bucket load of people doing up old instruments, and I think this is where the Cigar Box Guitar Connection comes in as well, because there's a lot of cigar box guitar builders out there who find old instruments and repurpose them. They find old timbers and they repurpose that. And cigar box guitars, or 3 or 4 string instruments and things like that, which traditionally are not expensive instruments to buy, are honestly, as long as they're well made, are a fantastically economical instrument to get a kid to learn guitar on to start with. And I truly believe that, especially for the real little tackers. As long as the strings aren't too tight on their little fingers and the frets are done nicely, you can actually get a really great tone out of them, and they're a really wonderful instrument for adults to learn on too. I mean, the amount of guitars, cigar box guitars that I sell to people who've never picked up an instrument before, it just blows my mind to think that someone's picking up an instrument, they've never done it before, and by that afternoon they can be playing a song because they can strut 3 strings, open tuning, fret the note across, just bar the notes, and there you go, you've got your chords. So, and you can be playing a song that afternoon with no experience whatsoever. So it's just a wonderful thing to be able to put music into somebody's hands. I digress. The other thing is, as I said, people who do up old guitars, and I'm talking from first-hand experience because that's one of the things that I do. I'm in this game because I love it. I absolutely love it, and the idea of finding old guitars and tracking down instruments and finding them at garage sales, or finding them under people's stairs, or finding them on eBay or on Reverb, when people are throwing them out basically because they go, oh, this, it's guitar's shit, it doesn't work, blah 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 blah. Man, I'm in the process of doing up a Kawai S1T, which is it's one of the first models, solid body models that Kawai ever did. It's based around 1964. It's a vintage instrument. It's a set neck with a screw-on plate to hold everything in place. It's basically in a nasty state of disrepair. I bought it for next to nix online. Having said that, I bought it from the United States, so it cost me over $100, in postage to land the damn thing. But it's like I couldn't let it go. I saw it and I just thought, it's just, and I got it, and it's a freaking disaster. I may have mentioned this on the other podcast, but it's so exciting to get something and take it out of a box when it's come from another country, and and it was in a shop. For God's sake, it was in a shop. It was up on a wall on eBay, in like very obviously like in some sort of guitar store. It must have been like a cash converters. We have cash converters here, like a pawn shop, in the States, and it was just in the worst state when I got it. The electronics were held together with sticky tape. Well, to the point that they didn't work. They don't work. The electronics, nothing works in there, So, because it's not attached properly, nothing's working. So, I tend to find that all of those guitars that I buy from the 1960s, the old Japanese guitars, they all need their jacks, the output jacks, basically replaced because they've all corroded and they're absolute garbage. Many of the potentiometers are actually still okay. They just need a bit of a spray with the lubricating spray, the pot cleaner. And I've been able to salvage a few of those and not have to worry about playing around too much with the electronics, because I do try and keep them stock. I don't want to mess around with them, and ideally I want to keep the original tuners with the original guitar. The idea is if I have to replace them, I'll also sell the the original tuners that I replaced. I've currently got at the moment. I haven't started working on it because it's going to be a hell of a lot of work to do this one, fix this one up. But I've actually got a Tesco hollow body jazz guitar from 1954. I want to say 1952. I'll have to double check that. It's either 1952 or 1954. It's an old Tesco. P something. I can't quite remember the number. But it is in a nasty state of disrepair. The neck itself is playable. It's not entirely straight, but it's until I string it up properly with all the 6 strings attached, I'm not going to know 100% sure. I'm not going to be 100% sure as to how it actually is. The neck itself seems to attach to the body quite well, so I'm not going to have to reattach or reset the neck, which I'm glad about. But the nut reed needs replacing. The tuners all need to be replaced. Having said that, there are 4 of the original tuners on the guitar which seem to actually function. So I'm in a quandary at the moment. I know I'm definitely not going to find another set of tuners to match the 4 that are still functioning, but I could purchase Spurzle replacements and maybe just use 2 of them if they fit. So that could be an option to say, well, I've got these are the original 4, or I replace all of them with all 6 Spurzles, and again put the original tuners in the guitar case and sell that off. And I've got the original 1952 guitar case as well, which still needs a handle, and it needs the Tolex, the covering, re-glued and replaced and patched in places, but it still functions. But you can hear the way I'm talking about it. It's just a labour of love. There's also, unfortunately, the back has cracked along a centre line, so that's going to need to be re-glued and reset, and I need to try and figure out a way of actually doing that where the glue is going to work, because I have to find out whether or not it was a hide glue, and I'm expecting from 1952 that it was going to be a hide glue. And being that I don't use hide glue or have ready access to a replacement for hide glue, I would be looking at trying to clean it out and use a type 1 type alternative or something like that. But that's only going to work if I can clean out the original glue that's in there. Either that, or, as I said, use hide glue. Try and find some hide glue and use the hide glue, which will actually remelt the old hide glue. So yeah, it's a finicky business. It is a situation where you've got to think about, as a builder, I want to do these old guitars up and I want to sell them for a great fun price, and get them back into people's hands and out of the garbage dumps and have people play them. But at the same time, it is a case of trying to make sure that I'm getting my value for money as well. There's no sense me spending $600 worth of my time on an instrument that I'm going to sell for $200 or $300, and I certainly wouldn't put some of these guitars up for sale for $700 or $800. They're just not worth it. Well, they're not. It's in my opinion, they're not. Having said that, I think, depending on what I do to it, depending on the parts that I put in, if I find a guitar that retailed in the store for for $200 or $250, 20 years ago, I think it's a little bit, to stick $300 pickups in the thing. I think it might be a little bit of overkill, and especially if I want to sell the guitar for for a friendly price, so that it can get into the hands of some kid or some some adult who's never played before. I want it to be at a friendly price, and that, I think, is the answer to Mr. Ruakangus's dilemma of trying to stay away from buying mass-produced guitars And that might be the thing. You know, keep these instruments out of the rubbish tips. Keep them out of the landfill. Keep the carbon wrapped up in the instrument that works. You know, and that's the thing from an ecological point of view too, I suppose. You know, just how long can you make a guitar? How long can you make a guitar last? His other argument, of course, was in relation to the price of a handmade instrument. We'll get onto that in a second. So, yeah, as I was saying, Ruakangas was talking about the value for money for a handmade instrument, and for somebody like him, that 3,000 euro price tag, you know, is a starter price. And he was saying that his guitars can, you know, go up to the 15,000 price range or whatever, 15,000 euro price range. And one of the things he was saying was, it doesn't mean that the guitar is necessarily any better, but what it probably means is that it has had more work done to it. There might be, you know, extra binding. There might be more of a hands-on approach. So it's not necessarily a better quality instrument. It's simply that I think what it comes down to is how much money the hardware costs for a start. But the biggest issue would be the time factor. You know, the time for someone to actually, an experienced worker, to actually put their hand on an instrument. And that I thought was a very interesting thing for him to say and to talk about, because one of the things that I've been pondering at the moment is questioning, the question for me is, how much do I sell my new guitar for? Now, I'm very, very, very happy with how the prototype actually came out. There's a couple of things that I've been looking at and I'm being very critical of. There are certain things that I like, and there are certain things that I've gone, no, I don't like the way that feels. Because at the moment, I had the strap button, the forward strap button, sitting in front of the neck heel on the neck, because that's where most of the made in Japan, you know, 60s made in Japan strap buttons were placed. They were placed basically just simply in front of the heel, and off you go. Well, I tried playing last night standing up with the strap on, and the damn strap just completely got in the way. So I've got to look at moving that strap button up onto the upper horn, to the forward point of the upper horn, which I'm quite happy to do. I am questioning then, once I've done that, I'll question, because of the size of the guitar body, which is not, it's actually quite a petite size of guitar body. I need to decide now as to whether or not whether the guitar will then become neck heavy, because having the strap where it is has centered the guitar. It's not neck diving. So and one thing I want to stay away from is the dreaded neck dive. So I do want to stay away from that. I have used a relatively heavy wood for the neck. On this particular guitar, I used blackwood, and I also used a blackwood fretboard. The blackwood fretboard is darker, so it's come from a different part of the tree, I believe. So, and also the neck is basically, it feels like it's a baseball bat, because I absolutely love big, thick, chunky necks. I'm not really into thin necks. But even while I'm playing it, I've got that feel for it, and I'm feeling the neck, and I'm thinking, okay, there's certain aspects of the neck that I want to shave down further. Now, I think once I've shaved the neck down further, that'll reduce the amount of timber on the neck, and that'll actually compensate because I think at the moment, if I move the strap button to the upper horn, from behind the neck in front of the heel, it'll have a bit of neck dive. So I think once I've removed some of that timber from the neck, it'll just make it less heavy, and I think it'll balance actually really nicely. So, these are the things you need to do when you're building an instrument. And the idea with this instrument is I absolutely love it. It feels good, it looks good, there's so much about it that I absolutely love. I want this particular instrument to be a relatively budget-friendly instrument. I want it to be a guitar that a parent could buy as a quality instrument for their child. I also want it to be quite affordable for a gigging musician. And what I mean by that is I'm not talking about necessarily guys in super bands. I'm talking about guys that go down and play pub gigs. A guy who might get together and jam with his mates once or twice a week, and then get up and go to the local, and play a few riffs. I want a quality instrument that's going to sound really good, feel good in the hand, but I want it to be very, very cost friendly, and that is a big thing, a big target. So I have, I'm looking at also thinking, okay, well, I do want to use quality parts. I like using the Kluson tuners. I've actually used the Kluson 600 plate tuners. I was absolutely wrapped with them. They feel beautiful. They just got a great feel. The ratio's really nice. The pickup itself, I absolutely love. It's by Wade Costenbader, who's in the States. Wade Costenbader has a little company called Victory Pickups, and he makes his version of gold foil pickups. There's a few. He does tarnished versions. He does gold versions, silver versions. He just does such an amazing job, and I love it. And the sound is raunchy and gutsy, and it's a single coil, so it's that little bit of 60 cycle hum. It's just 90 cycle hum, 60 cycle hum. I've gone blank. It's got that real raw kind of vibe about it, and it loves a bit of distortion and a bit of muff, and stick it on a big muff pie, and it's great. They just work so well. The bridge I'm looking at the moment, I'm currently using a type of Tune-o-matic style bridge, more the Fender style than the Gibson style. But I'm actually thinking of using or doing that crossover with the cigar box guitars that I do with like a cigar box guitar style adjustable bridge, floating bridge, and I love that, and I think that would be great, with string retainers at the back. Look, this is what I'm doing. This is building instruments and things like that. There are options, and I think Mr. Ruokangas makes a damn fine point about building quality instruments, buying top quality instruments that will last forever. But don't forget, if you're buying an instrument for your 14-year-old son or daughter, or a 13-year-old son and daughter, they may turn around after 6 months and say, I don't like doing that. That's not what I'm into. Kids are fickle. I think buying a $3,000 or €3,000 guitar for a 14-year-old kid is absolutely fucking ridiculous. Sorry, I apologise for dropping the F-bomb, but I think it is. It's absolutely crazy. Unless you're sitting back on $1 million a year and you're sitting back on big cash, it ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen in my house, that's for sure. However, I would be very happy to buy a good rebuilt instrument. That'd be fun. So righto. So I guess in closing, there are definitely certain things that I agree with in relation to what Mr. Ruokangas was talking about, and I certainly believe that when there's a great deal of skill involved and a great deal of work and time involved in creating a handcrafted instrument, a fair price has to be taken into consideration. And if a fair price is a €3,000 price tag on an instrument, then
then fair enough. I don't begrudge him that price at all. In fact, there are many Australian builders here who I hold in high esteem, who build the most amazing handcrafted instruments that that aren't, they're not cheap. I don't consider them to be cheap. But just keeping in mind, what I believe to be cheap or expensive. So I should say what I believe to be an expensive price or a high price. Other people might look at and say, well, I don't think that's a high price. Maybe they're in a different financial group than I am. I believe that, a $4,000 price tag is not unreasonable for a totally handcrafted and immaculate instrument. I don't think that's too much. However, I don't have $4,000. I don't have the money. I don't have that. That's an instrument that would be legitimately out of my budget, at the moment. So, I would be looking at alternatives. I would be looking at a price point that I was comfortable. I was comfortable to spend money on. And it doesn't mean that I don't think that the other instrument's worth $4,000. It just might simply be that I don't have $4,000. Or maybe that if I had $4,000, maybe I'd want to get two of the other type, or buy the guitar and an amplifier. Maybe that's a price in my mind. Maybe that is a price in my mind. $2,500 maybe is what I believe is a great price for a great handmade guitar. But that's just me. I wonder how you feel about it. So anyway, it's Adam from the Handcrafted Guitar Builder. That's kind of my 2 cents worth. What do you reckon? Chuck some, pop some comments up on the group. Let us know what you think. Pop some comments up on Podbean or up on iTunes. Don't forget to rate us. As I said, I am working on some interviews coming up in the very near future, and but I thought it was just prudent to kind of to maybe discuss that particular YouTube video, and it's only just come up as of the 23rd, Thursday the 23rd of November 2017. If you're listening to this in the future, go and check it out. He had some very, very, very interesting ideas and interesting thoughts, and it's well worth. I think he spoke for about 14 or 15 minutes about it, which is a lot less than I've spoken about it now. Anyway, I'll let you go. Have a good one. Bye.